nice panel here to help us walk through what this issue is. How do we implement it? How do we get support for it? Where does funding come from, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to take a little bit of walk through that, and then we're going to open it up for questions from you all and from the people on our Zoom call, if anybody has any questions. So does that sound good? Everybody okay with that? All right, great. Thank you. Thank you. So I'll let Sarah introduce herself, talk a little bit about where she's from, and then we'll move on.
Well, the very short version, I'm Sarah Siebel, and I've been at, I'm Sarah Siebel.
I'll help them make sure they get all their tech issues out.
Thank you. I need
Okay.
help. So I've been at First Universalist since 2003. Most of those years gardening all around the building. That's how I became aware of the problem. There are no public toilets in the neighborhood, and our whole congregation, members of our congregation, have worked as a team to address this question. And I'll tell you a little bit more later during questions.
My name is Andy Carey, and I'm the Vice Chair of Reach Advocacy, co-founder of MC Collaborative, and I'm a social worker who just worked a long time with the housing deprived community in Rochester. And restrooms and facilities, of course, have always been a concern of mine, and also the image and some of the stigma around what would happen with public restrooms and how homeless individuals would treat it. That's always been a big issue of mine as well, that I like to dispel some myths, and there's a lot of innovative ways to work on this. So I was really pleased when I was asked to be on this panel, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
I'm Julie Domaratz. I've been mayor of the village of Fairport since January of 2019. I think I take a different approach to this question of public restrooms that may not always be from a, yeah, let's go perspective. I think that when I was elected, I was able to look at it and say, here are the things that I'm concerned about that we don't have answers to. So that's been some of my experience that I'll talk about. I'm originally from Fairport. I grew up there. I live today in the house that I grew up in on the north side of the village. Go north side, because we're the downtrodden north side, but we're becoming the very popular north side now. And I hope to bring some of my experiences to this discussion.
Great.
Thanks.
Great. Bryan Aptekar is on Zoom from Portland. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning. Well, my time. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being
Good
here.
morning.
I am Bryan Aptekar. My pronouns are he and him. I work currently in the Safe Rest Village program, which is a program for setting up small villages, tiny homes for folks experiencing houselessness here in Portland. But I was asked to join because of my years working at Portland Parks and Recreation, also with the city of Portland, managing public toilets, public restrooms in our parks, and also overseeing the Portland Loo as a project. I'll throw out my Portland, my toilet joke. I was nicknamed the lieutenant by my former boss as the person managing, that's the person managing the Portland Loo program. But Evan is with us. I'll let him introduce himself. The city of Portland actually owns the product of the Loo, which is pretty unique for us. But I can tell you later more about that if you're interested. And I also managed our COVID response, which did include providing 24/7 restrooms for folks to have hygiene access, to wash their hands and stuff during the early, well, throughout the pandemic. So I've just last thought, I've had the same conversation with communities all over the country for the last 5 or 10 years. People call and ask questions about, you know, the Loo and how Portland has done things. By no means are we the only ones struggling with the same things you all are struggling with. How do we balance needs with the challenges that come with having public toilets? And so yeah, happy to be a part of this conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Bryan. Evan Madden is also on the Zoom call from Portland and is the sales manager for the Portland Loo. He's also one of the lieutenants. You want to introduce yourself, Evan?
Yes, my name is Evan Madden. I'm actually also from Portland, Oregon as well. Actually, from 2013 and on, I worked with Bryan Aptekar to manage the restrooms that we'd build for the city of Portland, as well as replacement parts, and then also use Bryan as a reference for cities all over. They're interested in how the Portland Loo works in Portland and could work elsewhere. So my business is Madden Fabrication. We build the property or the idea of the Portland Loo. So we manufacture all the restrooms from 2008 and continuing on. We also have a contract to sell the restroom as well too. So we do work with the city very closely for their product and pay them for their royalty as well. And then we work with many other cities as well to get them their restrooms that they want to build and install. Yeah, so I worked with Bryan since 2013, if I recall correctly, and we make sure that other cities just know how the restrooms work and can be used. But more importantly, we work for mostly Portland's restrooms to make sure they were installed and maintained properly, as the city kind of expanded to 20 plus restrooms in the city now.
So I just want to thank you, Evan. I just want to check in with everybody. Can everyone hear okay? Our Zoom callers? We are having trouble up here with hearing a little bit. Anybody have any? Okay, it's probably just us, but all right. What's that? Okay, so our Zoom callers, can you guys slow? We want to slow down some of the talking. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, thank you, Bryan and Evan. All right, so the concept is to provide a 24/7 restroom facility that both supports visitors who are coming here for events, our community residents that are around here, as Mary pointed out, Jiva Theater, St. Mary's Church. We have the First Universalist Church, as well as the Washington Square Park and the Neighborhood Association. So Sarah, can you share with us and the folks on Zoom, what was the impetus and basis for pulling together this forum and what the goal is?
Well, there are no public, oh, I'm so
Okay,
sorry.
there we go.
There are no public toilets in this neighborhood, and Washington Square Park, right across the street, is the site of rallies and vigils and gatherings, Dachshund Parades, which we love, and so on. And we get requests to use our bathrooms from people at these events, as well as passersby and homeless people. And we have had to pick up after people who didn't have restroom access. And I'm confident that this was going on for a long, long time before I have arrived in 2003. And we have a special sympathy for the marginalized among us who often cannot advocate for themselves. And people do sometimes travel to Europe and come back and say, I found public facilities there. Why can't Rochester do that? And over the years, we have advocated for 24/7 restrooms. So 24/7 is very important because there are some, the library, bless their hearts, has wonderful access to their restrooms, but they have limited hours and there really is nothing after hours that's available. We started collaborating a while ago with City Council member Elaine Spall, and then later with Council member and Vice President Mary Lupian. And we have spoken to City Council. We have looked at other US cities trying to solve the same problems. And today we would like to exchange information. We have invited City Council, Mayor Malik Evans, Monroe County Executive Adam Bello, our colleagues from St. Mary's and Jiva and Washington Square Park Community Association, and also Rochester Downtown Development Corporation and others, and look forward to sharing questions and answers with you all.
Excellent. So when we're thinking about creating something like this, or we're beginning to support a project that really may have differences opinions, or bringing in different elected officials to talk about that, it's really important to understand, how do we garner support? So I have a couple pointed questions for Bryan and Mayor Domaratz. When thinking about this conceptually in your community, what are some important items to consider in the process of garnering support? And I'll start with Mayor Domaratz and then we'll go to Bryan.
So I think that I think the topic of a public restroom is different here than it is in the village of Fairport. There are different concerns from the community and from the constituency that has access. We also have a public library. The impetus that came for this originally, so I have my bathroom humor that comes from one of our constituent supporters. You can come to Fairport, but you can't go. And if you've been to any of our board meetings talking about the public restroom, you will have heard that, including in newspaper articles. I think you have to look at who you're looking to serve and who in the community is there that supports this and where do you get the funding? For example, in our community, one of the big considerations for how we configured our public restrooms, one was the location, the original location that was designed originally prior to my coming into office was on Main Street in front of our police department. And it brought a lot of negative feedback from the community that they don't want a public restroom in front of the police department and on Main Street. There was much more push to try and get something that was along the canal. But where it was recommended originally would have solved one of the problems, which they were trying to decide, how do you solve the problem of people being at a very popular public farmers market with no public restroom except for when the library is open. So, you know, some of the folks that this solves a problem for is the library. Just around this area, there's a building called the Box Factory. They have restrooms that are designed to be for the businesses inside the Box Factory. We have public festivals that people are like, well, is this going to solve that problem? These bathrooms are actually not intended to be open for all of the festivals because those festival management are supposed to provide their own public restrooms. But so it starts with, who is this designed to serve? Who is going to be your chair, your cheerleaders who are going to bring this forward? And then how do you get the community to embrace it in a way that makes sense for the people you're trying to serve? So ours, obviously in Fairport, the people who live there want a certain product. So it's got to meet the needs of that product. And then as you start to move through this is, how do you get funding? So when I was hearing you talking about engaging the mayor, engaging the county, what I hear in my head is, oh my gosh, do they have any COVID money left? Can I get a grant from any of these groups? Do our, not just the local people, but engage your assembly member, your state senator? Can they get you any funding to assist from the state? Because all of those factors have helped us to be able to afford this. And then the last thing I'll pass this along is, think about the long-term consequences to how you are going to fund the maintenance, the everyday maintenance, and the long-term support for the infrastructure that you're creating. Because that was my biggest concern from a village perspective, is they all had these great plans and money to build it, but nobody ever considered the long-term consequences of how do you make sure that it gets cleaned without wiping out your operational budget from a village perspective? How do you make sure that you get shared services? So we're working to share some of those services with the town. Those are all factors to look at. I hope I answered that.
Oh, that was a great answer. I'm wondering what it was like for Portland to do the same thing, Bryan.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I have little to say after that because you covered it very well. You know, our experience was a little different. You know, putting on my Parks and Rec hat, we had public restrooms throughout our system. They were only open park hours, and some of them were closed seasonally because for various reasons, winterization and staffing. And 24/7 is a very different thing. I echo what the mayor said in terms of you know, who do you want to serve, right? Like there are people living on the streets and they do have needs. And if there's a public restroom, then they're going to hopefully use that. If there's not, they're still going to go and someone's going to be cleaning that up. And that is less of a that's more of a health hazard, more of a concern for whoever's doing that, you know, direct contact, than if they have the opportunity to go to a restroom. And it's obviously a lot more humane and civilized. You know, I think it's a humanitarian need. From the city's perspective, I've said this actually at a retreat with Evan when we had we're sort of brainstorming ways to improve the loo as a product. You know, no city really wants to provide public restrooms because they cost. They get vandalized. People do crazy things. That's just real. That's unfortunate. But I've also had park staff, maintenance staff say the parks would be a lot better if nobody came to them, because then they wouldn't get broken and used. And, you know, that's not real. People are out there, people are using the restrooms in the parks and they need them. And to build, for us to have built new parks or kid magnets like fun fountains that people can play in, festival square spaces for events that don't have any public restrooms, it just isn't realistic. I absolutely, we struggled with the 24/7 option, how to make it available at night. Our answer was often to put them towards the edges of parks in the right of way. And so even if we have parks are closed at night and we don't have fences and we don't kick people out, we have a reason to say you shouldn't be further in the park doing whatever at night, but a restroom at the edge is okay. So you know, location is really critical when you get to that point. I also echo what I think I heard the mayor say, like, you know, ongoing maintenance costs are very real. They're not necessarily comparable to the sort of upfront purchase and installation, whatever restroom, brick and mortar, Portland loo, porta potties, whatever they are. They need to be serviced, and they will get vandalized, and they will, you know, need to get fixed to stay open. And so just figuring that out, budgeting that, thinking that through is important. In sort of strategizing how you go forward with achieving this goal. And for us, bundling that work with other existing service work, whether it's janitorial work or park technicians who are otherwise cleaning, you know, the parks, picking up trash, emptying the trash cans, fixing irrigation heads, all that kind of stuff. That's a way to do it. We've had in the 7 of our public restrooms that are 24/7. We've contracted the cleaning of that out to the local business improvement district that has a kind of a, you know, street cleaning effort in the downtown business area. And they have staff that while they're out doing other work on the streets, cleaning up streets, can also then clean the trash cans and the toilets. And that helps sort of economy of scale. It helps bundle the work rather than have one person who has to go and do all of the restrooms. That sometimes is over unrealistic for a small community, I would gather.
Okay.
I could say so much more. So I'm just looking at my notes to see if there's anything else I could say. Ask me more questions and I'll share more later.
Yeah, I have a few questions and then we're going to take it to the crowd.
Yeah.
It's about 1:27 and this, my moderation is until 1:50 and then these lovely folks out here are burning with lots of questions. So we're gonna keep coming back to you. All right. So, you know, in thinking about this conceptually, and understanding that some folks may have given you feedback that you were unaware of or maybe weren't quite thinking about, what are some highlights of feedback in terms of concerns for the constituents of your area, Mayor? And how did you handle those?
I actually want, because I forgot one of the constituent groups that I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that
please add.
in our design really want to serve. So I'm going to give you I'll start with the negative and I'll make sure that I
Okay.
hit the positive.
That's always fun.
So negatives were, how much money is this costing? How
Sure.
much are these? You're going to raise our taxes to pay for this. It's a political football that you will, if you are an elected official. I've been attacked about this at least 3 times in 2 different campaign cycles. And we even made articles in city newspaper with Dave Andriata, who happens to live in the village of
He sure
Fairport.
does.
So that those kinds of things. This is going to get broken. There's going to be more homeless people living in Fairport, hanging out in Fairport because of this bathroom. It better look like it meets the standards that we have in Fairport because we are known as a historical community. And we have addressed some of these things. But I will tell you, the other side of the coin is fantastic. When this is designed and when it's almost complete, be prepared because there are nonstop supply chain issues and the cost of building something from when this was originally pushed out in 2018 and I picked it up in 2019. The cost has different plans. It's doubled. It's in a different area. It looks different. It looks very high end. It's meant to look like the historical area that's been built in. However, it also has adult changing tables. It has child changing tables. So when you're talking about your constituency, we're in an active area of the canal that is looking to be in more and more supportive of people who are differently abled, and supporting everybody who is in our community, whether they don't have a place to go because they're homeless or perhaps during the day they are out, walking in Fairport. Moms, dads, older adults, because older adults, that was the concern about the farmers market, which we've solved a different way, is that people come to either walk or go to the farmers market and they don't have any place to go. And as you become older, I'm getting there, but things change in your biology and you have to go more often.
Yeah.
So positives, you're now supporting many different people of different age groups, different concerns, whether it's I'm going kayaking, but I'm in a wheelchair and I need to be able to go to the bathroom as well near the kayaks site. Those are positives. We have engaged Active Adventures. I'm trying to think of the name of the director who's been there for ribbon cuttings for the work that we've done along the canal. And I'm sure we'll be back for the ribbon cutting for this public restroom. I credit the former mayor. While I didn't like the idea before, and I didn't like where it was on Main Street, and I didn't like the fact that nobody ever scoped out how much it's going to cost in the long run, I will make sure and have given credit to him because he is the one who pushed this idea. It's having those people. So
yeah,
there's positive and negative.
Yeah.
And you solve the negative one by planning ahead with your financial pieces. And then the cost was a huge increase, but our assembly member and our state senator stepped in to give us grant funding from the state, which means our small village taxpayers will not see the implication in their taxes.
excellent, excellent. So, so in moving on from garnering support and developing something like this, let's talk a little bit about implementation and maintenance. Bryan and Evan have seen this come to fruition, have seen how this has impacted their community. So when considering the creation of a facility like this, Bryan and Evan, its purpose and the overall maintenance of the grounds, what do you see are important aspects of that we want to consider locally as you implement it and then maintain a facility like this? And I'll start with Evan, since Bryan, you've had a couple minutes.
Yes, so really the Portland Loo, the structure itself is really meant to be what I kind of consider prison proof, where you can leave it on the sidewalk for 24/7, 365, and with people all the time and energy in the world can pick at it but not destroy it. And really what we've developed with Portland and other cities is how to just improve it to get to that ultimate like prison grade level for the restroom too. So really the restroom is very strong and durable that it can't be taken apart or taken out of service very easily by the general public too. So if they want to, we've had a lot of years to improve the design and make it harder. With that, all the parts and features of the restroom, from the plumbing and electrical and the door hardware as well, everything that could wear out and need to be replaced should be able to find locally as well. So with that, we kind of find what will be cheap to replace if it does, but also should be found locally to be replaced and kept working as well. So the structure itself, being stainless steel, is very durable and strong, and that's what will last kind of like a 100-year-old home. And I say like a very old home or building will last a long time if you maintain the infrastructure of it too. So the plumbing, electrical will kind of have to be probably wearing out at some point, but the structural bones of the restroom will last maybe 100 years or a very long time. With that, it is entirely powder coated and easily cleaned. So the general structure of the restroom is intended to be wiped down from graffiti and messes very easily with the coating that comes entirely on the restroom too. So with that, what makes the Portland Loo so unique, it's built not for the user, but it's built for the people that have to clean and maintain it to make it easiest for them. So in a way that's not comfortable to hang out and spend time in, the Portland Loo doesn't have any comfort features, but focuses on making sure it's just going to be easiest to maintain and open for the people that need to use it as well. So when parts aren't need to be expensively shipped from a long ways away, when everything can be worked on from local plumbers and supplies, it's able to maintained and kept open much cheaper than other restrooms.
Wow, that was quite succinct, Evan. A very impressed response. Any thoughts on that, Bryan?
Yeah, we make a good tag team. I for many years I was answering questions specifically about the loo. I'll try to just talk generally about restrooms because Evan can speak clearly to the loo as a product. Whatever restroom you all choose for their success. Back to the for us, the original idea for loo, creating the product of the loo, was the brainchild of one of our elected officials many years ago, and their approach was, we can't expect private sector to put this in front of their church or their business without demonstrating that it can work in public space. So that's why the first 6 or 7 loos, which was his idea, public restrooms, were placed at the edge of parks. I think that, what I think your question was about sort of location and installation and implementation of this idea. Location is really critical. I heard the mayor reflect concerns that the community had brought to her about, is this going to draw people who are experiencing houselessness? We hear that a lot as a question in Portland, and our experience has been no. We put them where people experiencing houselessness probably need them, and frankly, if it's too many blocks away, they're just going to go in the shrubs anyways. People, that particular audience, like, if you need to go, you need to go. You're not going to walk 5 blocks for it. That said, where you put them should be, trying to address as many audiences as you have. Public gathering spaces. You talked about a place that people have vigils and the Dachshund Parade. Like, clearly that's a gathering space. If there are people experiencing helplessness near there, then this 24/7 restroom will benefit them as well. And I think, this is a humanitarian gesture. This is a basic need that people have globally, and to provide them is critical. So whether it's a loo or another brick and mortar structure or whatever, where you put it will help its success, meaning in a park, in a church parking lot, wherever it is it visible? Is it if it's tucked behind and away, then it's going to have more trouble with sort of the mischief that comes with public restrooms than if it's out front and visible. As much as people don't necessarily want to see a toilet in the first thing you see when you come to a public space, that will help them be successful. That will help cut down on the mischief, and therefore the vandalism, and therefore the maintenance costs. Briefly, the 2 big maintenance costs that we have seen, and this is true of any public restroom, not just a loo. Plumbing, people flush stupid things. They flush clothes, they flush needles. So you always are going to have plumbing issues, and you're going to have lock issues. People fiddle with the locks. They just enjoy doing that. I can't explain human nature. If someone can, we can try and solve for that. But that is the, our locksmiths are very busy doing door locks, and we have worked with Evan and some engineering students at the local college to try and come up with a better lock, the best lock, the most amazing lock. That's just like a challenge.
So locks and flushing things down.
Yeah.
Plumbing and locks. Okay.
Plumbing and locks.
So I wanted to direct some of our questions towards Andy and sorry, Sarah, in regards to so when you're thinking about these concepts, very different concepts, the Portaloo, which sounds like it could be moved different places and has a different structure than Fairport's concept. How do you see this, Andy, impacting the population that you serve? And then Sarah, how do you see this impacting the church and the community around you? Whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, I'd be happy to go first. Yeah, I always find it interesting that bathrooms, what I consider just as a public health thing and something nice for all cities to have, always become a homeless issue, because I don't really think that's a homeless issue. I think it's about restrooms. I think it's a whole brand new economy now with Lyft drivers and Amazon drivers and Grubhub, and they need facilities as well. And then just when I think about when I'm downtown with my family and we're at all these events and you have to find a private business, if you can find it open downtown at that time, to go find a bathroom. So when I think about people who lack housing in our community and the facilities, I think it's a wonderful idea. And I think people would be surprised. We run a lot of shelters for many years now. We just opened up a bunch. I think people would be surprised how respectful the homeless individuals would be of that facility. I do agree there will be heavy substance use in some areas. There's some mental health issues, but those are issues that aren't directly related to the bathroom. That's happening on every street, every alley, that is not right in the middle
right in
of the
Fairport
facility. Yeah, exactly. And in the suburbs as well, like Fairport. So I think kind of changing the dialogue around that is very important to me. I think it is something that is desperately needed for our homeless community, but I don't think that is the make or break for bathroom facilities. I think that having nice restrooms around the community is a great idea. And it's great hearing about the Portland restrooms, and Nick and I were laughing how when you go to Europe, there's restrooms all over the place. And I've been in some cities where there's plenty of public restrooms, and I've never felt like I couldn't go in there because there's going to be danger or anything like that from their surrounding community. So those are my thoughts on it.
Excellent. Sarah?
Well, the Unitarian Universalists have very soft hearts. And we have a lot of homeless people around here, and we get to know them, and they need this. So I think that we would definitely appreciate the difference between a need that isn't being met right now and a need that needs to be met. And it's not, as everyone else has said, it's not just homeless people who need it. I was sitting on a sidewalk in front of the church at the Urban Agriculture Day, Gardening Day. And there were a few of us talking, and a mother came by with a couple of adorable little girls, and she said, well, I would love to look at your garden, but really, do you have a bathroom we could use? So it's just all around us. This is a basic human need. It should be a need that can be answered with dignity. And I think it would make quite a big impact.
Great. So my questions have been asked, my part of trying to facilitate a couple different conversations around what would it take to develop this? What would it take to implement it and maintain it? And then what does it look like to impact the community? From Andy and Sarah's point of view. Bryan and Evan and Julie, do you have any ideas about how this might impact? And then we'll take it to the folks that are out here for questions. Yes, or impact the community that you have in Fairport.
I think that the impact, one of the things that, while I said this is more high end and it looks from the exterior. I have pictures if we ever get there. On the exterior, this structure looks like it fits within the area where it's being built, which has got historical buildings in it. It looks like the trolley station, and it was designed to look like the trolley station just maybe 100 yards down the street from it. And it was put there because this is an area that is now a pedestrian biking only area in our village. It used to be a street. But if you go to the interior, the same ideas that were discussed in Portland were a part of the same ideas that went into the design. So whether it's here in the city or in the village of Fairport or in Portland, the interior, it's on the stark side. It was designed with the idea that you need materials that will last a very long time, and there's not much to it. It's pretty clean, and you have the facilities. The floors are meant to be, they're not carpeted, they're not tiled, they're meant to be hosed out if you need to hose the building out. It's completely designed for the intention of having an easy to clean facility that will last a very, very long time. The other piece of it, I had one more spot that I was thinking about.
Take your time.
You know what, I lost the thought, but locks.
Yes, the
Locks.
locks.
So, you know, there was a lot of discussion about how we deal with locks. We will not be open 24/7. I can't tell you the exact times that will be open, but the village does not want people to choose this as a living facility. Therefore, there will be a time. There are two types of locks on the door. One is an automatic locking system so that it can be set for a time of day. And then there's the indicator, which maybe that might be more the part, I don't know, maybe both of them will be the part that inquisitive minds will try and mess with, but it will automatically lock. The area, as much as you don't like to believe that we live in an area with lots of cameras, that facility is located right on a very public street, very much in the open where everybody can see it. But there are also a lot of cameras because there's a lot of expensive equipment that was put into this location. And our police we have our own police force, and they're directed that, you know, at closing time and opening time, we would like you to make an effort to pause and make sure that there are no issues around that, whether that's someone who has a problem who's there, or whether that's someone who's trying to inhabit it. And I think that you have to take in those considerations. I don't think we'll have problems with people trying to inhabit it. Although, you know, in the village of Fairport, people would be surprised. We have porta potties there at the site right now, and there is someone who is missing a home or a house, and they were taking up residence inside one of the porta potties. So, you know, you might think that the village of Fairport, it's this affluent area. We have the same problems with drugs that exist everywhere. We have the same problems with people looking for shelter.
Yep. Evan and Brian, just want to give you guys a couple minutes. If there's anything else you wanted to say about the impact of adding the Portaloo to your community, and if there was a positive impact, or how that worked for all you. And then we'll go to questions with the audience.
I'll go first if that's okay, Brian.
Sure.
Really, when the Portland Loop comes to a new neighborhood, there's always skepticism that it is going to be good for the community. And there's always voices that always allow that it will cause more problems. And that was very common in Portland as the Portland Loop was slowly added to nicer neighborhoods and more tougher neighborhoods that needed restrooms as well too. And the general sense was once it was added, it didn't cause more problems. It did help alleviate the restroom need. So if you give people a chance to go to the restroom, you're less likely to encounter waste on the streets. And that was true in principle when it did play out when it was added to these cities and parks. With that, the restroom is semi-private. So you can see the floor of the restroom as you walk by and approach it. But the Portland Loo has engineered dead space that you can't have any visibility encroached upon. So you do have complete privacy. And with that, it keeps people from living in the restroom as well too. So when you can be seen and heard from the outside, you're more likely to not spend any more time in there than you have to, camping as well. So with that, the restroom is easily monitored as well. And there's a lot of just kind of crime prevention and how we use blue lights so you can't find your veins in the restroom as well too. And that it is also completely anti-graffiti powder coated as well, so it could be cleaned and maintained easier. So really it does last and is used as intended. And in San Antonio, they did a study where they added a Portland Loo restroom along their Riverwalk, which was their main destination in San Antonio. And that really improved the cleaning costs of about $100,000 a year to make sure that it was really cleaner all the time in an area that didn't have restrooms too. So Brian, I don't know if you want to speak for more as well.
Yeah, just
Oh, I could talk, I won't, but I could talk for hours about toilets, honestly. I mean, there's a lot to know, more than what anyone could imagine and I ever knew before I started this job. I applaud you all for thinking about it and for having this conversation. I maybe got too focused on flushing and locks. I think the location of the specific location on the site, particularly if you go with the Portland Loo, because of those sort of louvers at the bottom that let people see in, and therefore they see your feet, they see if you're in there, if you're staying longer than you should, if someone needs to get in, they can get in, they let you know. I think that only works if it's visible. So near the street, near a path, near a bike lane, whatever. For our community, we use them. I'm sorry, I don't work at Parks and Rec anymore. 20 years, it's hard to give up the we. Portland Parks and Rec, thanks to a bond measure, has done replacement of restrooms and new restrooms in parks. We've done both brick and mortar and loos. We've replaced old brick and mortars with loos, Portland loos specifically. We've replaced brick and mortar with brick and mortar. We've put both in new parks. I think, the site dictates what makes sense for you all. The cost dictates what makes sense for you all. I will say that one of the loos downtown Portland in our South Park blocks, which is like 100-year-old historic beautiful space. It's a utilitarian metal thing. But we put a historic photo on the front of the park blocks 100 years ago when the trees were this big and now they're, towering elms. It fits in beautifully and has been fine. Like, just throwing that out there. I think people like them. Having restrooms available, not just loot. People like having restrooms available in any public space. It's
excellent.
good for everybody. Done.
Thank you, Brian. So we're going to take about 5 minutes. We want to take a moment for you to talk with your neighbors that are here in the pews to ask yourselves, is this something that you would like? And is this something, do we have any questions from the audience for our panelists that you want to see answered? So take about 5 minutes, talk with your neighbors, have some conversation about what you think about the 24/7 concept. And then there's going to be some index cards going around. I think Lois and Greg will be handing them out. Oscar has one. So if you have any questions, write those down while you're having that conversation. Let's take 5 minutes to do that. Say hello to your neighbors. Yes. Was it made portable? It sounded like.
It never was. There's a Yeah. I know. Did you invite her? She must have seen it in our weekly email. Yeah, no, she responds to my emails like all the time. And she's like, thank you for what you're doing. Yeah. She's on our gardening committee. Yeah, I think that's true.
Because they're all going to be about the same. Just read them as they go. Okay.
All right,
So.
I think we're gonna bring it back together. If folks on the Zoom call, have questions, can you make sure to put them in the chat? Yeah. Who's? Oh, the left. Yes. No, that's, mhm. Oh, thank you so much for taking a moment to sit down. You got a couple more?
One more.
Okay, great. So I've got quite a few questions here. Some are directed at specific panelists and some are general questions. I've put some of the questions together because some of them are very, very similar, specifically around cost and structure. Okay. And then I'm wondering if we have questions on the chat. It looks like we've got a couple. There might be a couple folks that have said some things. All right. Okay. All right, I'm going to try this out. So bear with me. And all of your questions are very important, but there's a lot of them. And we have to make sure that we stay on time, being aware that we're ending at 2:30. We got 30 minutes. All right. One of the questions that was more of I'm not sure, Evan or Brian, if you have any way to quickly show us what the Portland Loo looks like by sharing your screen or showing it to us. If you can't do that right now, I'm going to go on to another question and I'll come back to that question. Okay. The next question is, let me find it. So when we're thinking about Portland, there are about, it sounds like there's about 20 Portland Loos there. What would be the concept for Rochester? How many bathrooms would we be considering originally? That was the first question. Talking about one bathroom down in Washington Square Park. Is that the concept? Sarah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
This is a try. Well, if we get one, it will be a trial. If we do get one, it will be a trial of one, and then it will expand. Now, I happen to know Portland Loos have been successful, and they've put multiple loos installed. And as a matter of fact, people are ordering it around the country, including Cincinnati, Ohio.
oh,
So
excellent.
that's interesting.
Okay, so that's our first question.
Yeah.
Did you want to jump in, Evan?
Yeah, this is Evan with the Portland Loo. I say most cities, and what I really recommend is just trying one at first as a pilot project, as an experiment, and how you think it'll work in the area you want to try it. What really helps with that is using, kind of Brian touched on this, it's called CPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. And I believe it's a Canadian concept or principle that really kind of structures physical items to the public in a way that just doesn't encourage bad behaviors with that as well. So with that, the Portland Loo does use crime prevention principles in the design of just the structure itself, but I really recommend looking at those principles and how you want to add the restroom to where you eventually want to place it as well. And putting it in common areas, in right-of-ways, and highly trafficked areas is a great place to start. But I definitely recommend just one restroom to begin with, and then slowly add more as you know you need to add them in specific areas as well. So one is a great place to start. And I'm working on trying to add a picture to the chat. And I believe I had submitted pictures as well, but I'll be working on that right now as well too, so you get an idea of what we're talking about with the Portland Loo.
We can get to that in a second. Are they able to share their screen? Okay, great. So a follow-up question to, oh, that's the is that the Portland Loo?
Yeah, I swapped my background photo, so you can see me in a Portland Loo, and that one is in.
So Brian has physically became a Portland Loo. Just
Ta-da!
so thank you, Brian. A follow-up question, Evan, is are the Portland Loos attached to the sewer and water systems? And what's the winter like in Portland?
Yes, the restrooms are connected to water, sewer, and electric. We can do electric as an option and just do all solar in sunnier places, but in places that get cold weather, like Rochester or even New York or Portland as well, I don't recommend solar at all. So electrical power would be required for the restroom too. If you do get cold weather, which I very much assume you do, we developed a cold weather toilet upgrade that we established for Boston and Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I even have this cold weather system in our northern Canadian installations as far north as Ketchikan, Alaska and Kodiak, Alaska as well too. So what we do for cold weather cities is we pipe in hot water and antifreeze mixture at 160 degrees through the interior cavity of the toilet bowl. This way I'm heating the water in the toilet bowl just below where it sits and collects and keep that freezing and functioning as well. I also use a heat trace and other heating elements to keep the plumbing as well from freezing. And that system is rated to about -20 degrees Fahrenheit. So very cold for a restroom that's sitting open to wind and drafts in very cold weather on the city sidewalks. So with that, the restroom can very much function in the winter, but doesn't provide any comfort to the user, just enough to keep it opening and functioning through the cold weather periods.
Excellent. Follow-up question to you as well, Evan. What is anticipated total cost of a 24/7 toilet like this? And this same question was also brought up for the brick and mortar. And that's a totally, I know these are going to be totally different numbers, but Evan, what's your take on that total cost?
Absolutely. So the restroom that I would provide is about $140,000 to $150,000, and that is an expensive purchase and upfront cost. But really, the majority of that is the construction of the stainless steel of the restroom. That's what makes it so durable and so strong, but also very expensive as well. So with that, it is connected to water, sewer, and electrical utilities. So with the purchase of the restroom at 140 to 150, the installation where you have to bring the utilities and the foundation to the restroom is kind of an unknown cost depending on how close you are to utilities that are nearby. And best case scenario is what I like to speak about. So if you have water, sewer, and electricity in the location you want to place the restroom, it's about $30,000 to $40,000. Best case scenario to have that restroom installed and connected to sewers. Worst case scenario, there's been other cities that didn't plan that as far. So to make sure that the restroom works well, you got to look above ground and you have to look below ground to make sure that it's easily connected and set up as well too. So that's when it comes to deciding that to make sure it works for people above ground and then connects cheaply as well after. So as worst case scenario in San Diego, they had to put the restrooms in an area that took utilities several hundred feet and under train tracks. So it was very costly to take it several hundred feet and then shut down rail service. That was about $600,000 to install this $140,000 restroom. So that was horrible planning. But in other instances in Portland where we replaced existing restrooms and structures, it's about 30 to 40,000 if I had to estimate to get that installed as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Don't go to, I just wanted him to bring up the slides. Go to the next one.
So we're still on the topic of the cost and location. Go ahead.
Okay, so this slide itself shows the Liftbridge Lane West, which was a street that was turned into a public site. It's got bike lanes, it's pedestrian, it's right adjacent to the canal. And the diagram that's the image that you see on the right-hand side. That was the work that we did. The image is an above look at the site, which is the triangle or towards the top of the triangle on the left side of the slide. So when we did the development for that site of Liftbridge Lane West, we have an east too in the village. We made sure that there was infrastructure. Fairport owns their own electric service. So we ran electric all along that the south side of the street, which is the side towards the canal. And we also made sure that we had lines for sewer and water. We are adjacent to some other pre-existing structures. So there is water and sewer that exists on that location. If you go to the next slide. So I haven't talked about costs. Some of it we had, go to the next slide. All right, so this is what the structure looks like. Go back one more. I'm sorry, I skipped you. The top picture is a front-on diagram of the building as it was designed. The design, when it went out to bid for, no, we're not talking about the cost of the design, just the building of the structure.
Mhm.
That went out to bid, and during the 2021 season, the low bid that we took was $393,000 with the expectation that it will go up, you know, because it's 2021, it's actually being constructed in 2022.
Right.
So that was the bid that came in. And you can see the building that's under construction on the right-hand side of the screen. It's also a lot more than just what a Portland Loo is. If you look on the left hand, we had a landscape architect because this is on the border of the canal path. It's in a very public area where it's meant to be placemaking and look really nice and really pretty. And so you can see all the plants when they were getting ready to go in the ground. If you go to the next slide, this shows you the exterior pictures. So thank you, Elizabeth, wherever you are, because she took these pictures. The doors, that is not the final door that will be on the public restroom. That's a temporary door. The doors we were told it would take 8 weeks for them to come. I think they finally arrived. This construction started back like May or June. We were told the doors would arrive roughly 8 weeks after they were ordered. They came in like November. They still haven't been installed, but you can see the inside. It's very stark inside. There's an adult changing table, which is in the second photo from the right, that's up against the wall. There's the sink. The floor isn't like luxury flooring. It's probably some form of concrete or like a stamped concrete so that it's very durable. And then the other parts of the structures. And by the way, the walls are set up. They're not powder coated like described by the folks in Portland, but they are meant to be very, very durable. We have these conversations over and over with the design team, as well as with the team from Village Hall who produced this. And to go back to somebody said, you know, that I'm a champion for this. It's the Village team. It's not me. It's the people who work for the Village of Fairport who make these things happen. But 393, I know we've exceeded 393, but we have to keep it in that range. And then when we talk about that funding, 175,000 of that came from our state senator. And then another 150. So ultimately we have funding in the range of almost $475,000 that came from our state representatives towards this. So at the end of the day, it's not going to cost village taxpayers in their taxes for the extravagant bathroom.
Did this meet, a question for you again,
Sure.
did this meet some of the historic requests that you had?
Yeah, if you go back to the very first slide that we looked at. So this street on the right-hand side where this is built, this street is built on trolley tracks. The main part that is light in color, those are trolley tracks that were buried underneath the street that we retrieved and brought above, coated them, and then put Medina stone down the middle of them. There's a bike path. And if you look, there's a metal rack that has a sign, welcome to our Fairport Village, right at the beginning of the lower part of the picture. Just over to the side of that, it's right next to historic trolley stop,
Right.
which is now a business, which is doing really well. The other side where you can see a little bit of a green awning is Royal Cafe, which is a gelato site.
Yeah.
Both of those sites, while they may, and on the other side is Ricky's Diner. While there was a lot of question like, oh, you're going to ruin our business.
Wow.
The gelato place was up because we have tables and chairs now there that stay year round. The gelato business was up 1,000%, I think, this year.
I was gonna say, they have really surged since this
Oh, yeah,
construction.
because people come to this street. So when you talk about being someplace where people are, there are people, Jim Maroney from Spectrum News or whatever it's called these days. He's from the area he and his family would be out there on Friday nights after this was built with pizzas from TK's down at the other end of the street, their bottles of wine, their wine glasses, and they had family dinners there every Friday night or Saturday night that the weather was nice. So you've got people gathered there.
And that was a
you have
ghost
to
town
provide
before.
them some place to go to the bathroom. And the nicer some place is, it's one of those things that people will, and the more people that are there all the time, the less damage you're going to have to your site.
Yeah, great. So brief questions that came through, and I hope, so as I've been kind of weaving conversation there and Mayor Domaratz has really touched on some of your questions. So I've been taking some of the questions that were asked and putting them aside just so folks know. So if you don't hear your specific question, it was because she might have answered that, or Brian or Evan answered it, just so folks understand. So Evan, Brian, Mayor Domaratz, maintenance, who takes care of maintenance and who monitors the space? Do you want to take the
Precisely and
yeah,
quick.
yeah, this isn't.
So monitoring the space, with our Fairport Electric site, we have lots of cameras all over our village because it's a utility company. So it's monitored at Fairport Electric. Our police, once it's open, will be monitoring the site. And what was the other part of the question?
And
Maintenance
yeah,
costs. We
maintenance.
haven't really started our maintenance yet. We are working to utilize Perrington Parks and Rec because they have public restrooms around the area to share some services, and it's still a work in progress. But we are trying to find ways to share those costs so that as a village located in New York State, if you put it to your DPW to go and maintain the site, you have to pay a minimum of 3 hours every time someone makes a trip there. If they come in the evening, or if it's like weekends or holidays, you're going to pay time and a half or holiday pay. So with, and it's the prevailing rate for your DPW. So you have to look carefully at how you're going to do this to make it the most cost effective. We're trying to initially get into it with shared services with the town of Perrington, who is already out taking care of their parks.
Great, awesome. Brian?
Yeah, I'll say for Portland, for both Lou's and our other public restrooms, the ones are all public parks. So the parks maintenance staff maintain them, except a few in the downtown, which I mentioned earlier are cared for by contract. And those are, a contract with a custodial service, and we bundled the work of multiple restrooms together to make that work. I would also, like, echoing what the mayor just said, that for us, and I'm assuming you all, there's a lot more use in the summertime than in the wintertime. And so we close several of our restrooms in the winter because we don't have enough use to make it worth having seasonal staff, or we don't have enough permanent staff for that.
Okay, great. Question for Brian and Evan. What has been the response of the Portland Police Department to these? Maybe initially, or maybe after they've been implemented?
Yeah, and I realized I didn't answer the observation question about who's observing them, and to that question, yeah, to that question, nobody. Like any more than any other park asset, we don't have cameras necessarily in parks, most of them, and they're like any other park asset, basketball court, tennis court, whatever. So the police, I think there was skepticism, frankly. The Parks Bureau was skeptical when they were first installed as well, as other jurisdictions, and Evan has said. And we've obviously come around to appreciating them as an asset. I think the police are the same. We have park rangers that are sort of halfway step towards park security. But they can't be everywhere. We have 100+ parks and natural areas. And so I think that they appreciate having people have a place to go. One thing we haven't talked much about, and I did hear you all mention that there are, people do have drug issues, some do, and we have in most of our Lou's the option we've had for sharps disposal for folks if they are using, and rather than suffering those needles being flushed or hidden, than just giving people a safe place to dispose of them behind the wall into the sort of utility closet in the back has been successful for us. So
Great.
did I answer that question?
Yeah, that for the question. A couple folks also brought up the idea of in other countries or in other areas, there might be they've talked about self-cleaning units. Is this something that people have considered or looked at? And
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, so that's actually how the Portland Loo came about, is as the self-cleaning restrooms failed in Seattle, the Portland Loo restroom was developed from that idea. So what happened was, so the Portland Loo was designed in 2007 and installed in 2008. But about 2005 to 2006, Seattle had purchased self-cleaning restrooms called APTs, automatic public toilets. They bought 5 toilets for $5 million, and they lasted under 2 years before they were uninstalled and sold on a government website. The city of Portland was paying attention to this news story, and as they were installing these self-cleaning restrooms, that they took the approach to eliminate what went wrong in those self-cleaning restrooms and create their own design for the Portland Loo. So as that restroom failed, or was there problems with the self-cleaning restrooms, that's what developed the Portland Loo. So the self-cleaning restrooms were pay to use. They eliminated people that would need to use the restroom, coming and going. Homeless that often rely on them the most couldn't afford to, or it wasn't an option to pay to use that restroom. It had total and complete privacy that drug use and prostitution really kind of flourished in those self-cleaning restrooms. And then the automated features that did clean them were vandalized and were very expensive to maintain and keep operational. So where the Portland Loo was born from was just a simple design that catered to just making sure it was just providing the minimal utilities of just a restroom and a place to wash your hands as well. So no moving parts and features. And again, the weak points being the front door and the flush handle. As people don't want to touch the flush handle, they often want to kick it or are harder on that flush handle. That's what tends to fail and break. And the same with Brian mentioned with the front door locks, that if they find the restroom closed when they think they need to use it, they'll use whatever they can to pry at, break, or get at that lock to get inside that restroom too.
okay, great. I had a couple questions, which I think Brian, you might have answered with drug use and possible sharps use. You know, how do we prevent the bathrooms from being used for illegal purposes, like drug use, et cetera? Yeah, Brian.
I mean, to be honest, you don't. People can go in and do what they do. I think, you know, the reason that the city of Portland appreciates the Portland Loo as a product, as an option, is that a lot of the design elements are intended to discourage that and address that. So we have sharps disposal, so we know people are going to go in and potentially, you know, use and have a leftover sharp. We make it available for people to dispose of. The louvers at the bottom, even on the top, if it's next to high rises. I'm not sure if y'all have high rises in your community, but you know, the louvers, if you go to the website and see, you know, are designed so that people can see in. They can't see you personally, but they can see feet. They can see if you've been in there for 5 minutes or 50 minutes. And if someone passes out, overdoses, whatever, you see them on the floor. If there's more than one pair of feet in there because they're doing something, it's not a parent and a little bitty kid, you know, you can see that, and that discourages that kind of activity. But I think people are still going to do what they're going to do. The design features of this over time have been improved to discourage the negative activities as much as they can. And that's why Portland has invested in continuing to buy them.
Yeah, I say that the public restroom is not going to solve your drug use issue, and it's going to solve the public restroom issue. And what the Portland Loo specializes in is just making it as hard as possible or inconvenient as possible to do that. And that's where we have no flat surfaces, no extra amenities that could be removed or kind of used and aided in that way. And the blue lights and sharps container really kind of discourage that kind of drug use aspect as well too. But, you know, it's a tough thing to kind of, you know, try to eliminate that kind of use aspect of it, but only so much you can do to make that as hard as possible in that sense.
Okay. Next question. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Go
just a brief, you know, we struggled with the idea of whether or not to have baby changing stations, right? Like, and I don't Evan could tell us if we've actually installed any. I think it depends on where it is, because people can set up and do drug stuff in there, and yet it's a very real need for parents to change a baby's diaper or sit a baby down while they go to the restroom. I think that's a really site-specific choice, but yeah, it's a challenge to design anything that fits everybody's needs and all the contingencies.
Okay.
Sorry, that's not an easy answer.
It's when we're thinking about this, really what we're talking about is reducing the harm of those kinds of issues on the bathroom and on the facility, and allowing people to do things that they need to do in order to be going, if you will. So next question is, when Jiva gets out of the shows, the bathrooms are very limited. Would public bathrooms be available to anybody, nearby businesses, churches, etc., and in acceptable conditions if we were to add this to the community? My sense is that the answer to that question will be yes, that it would be open to the public. Does anybody else have any feedback on that question?
If I could just chime in briefly, the one Portland Loo in Portland that isn't publicly owned is owned by a church that decided to install a loo outside next to their property that is a park. It's a church managed space that is quite frequently used for food service activities and those experiencing houselessness. So there is precedent for that, and I can put y'all in touch with them if you'd be interested in talking to them.
What you're describing is that a private location or a church location installed one on their property for events. Great.
Yep.
The remaining questions really are directed towards public funding, towards some of our city council that might still be here. Hi you all. Do you all feel comfortable maybe taking a couple of these questions? I'll throw them at you, and you can say whether or not they're very general questions, but so this is for Mary. What do you see as the biggest hurdle to address for the city to get behind this concept?
When it comes to projects, I think it always does come down to funding and also logistics. The initial cost is likely quite high.
Sit here.
Do you want me to sit there?
Video wise, I'm thinking.
Oh, sure.
Yes.
I know Jose needs to come.
I can sit back here. Okay. Thank you for adjusting for this.
Sure.
There's only a couple things here and they're not too difficult.
Yeah, so as I said, I think with projects like this, it always comes down to funding and also logistics in terms of how exactly we will hook up the plumbing and the water and the electricity and things like that. The initial project is likely to be a high cost, and we also have to consider the maintenance and what that looks like. We have right now an unprecedented influx of money into the community from the American Rescue Plan Act that we got to recover from the COVID pandemic. There may be still some of that funding that's unallocated that we could apply towards this. We also hopefully will be able to tap into our state and federal representatives to bring some money towards the project. But I think those are the biggest hurdles for the city, potentially the county getting behind this.
You want to share anything?
Sure. I think that also on top of that would be the combination of possibly having Monroe County help out depending on the location of it, but definitely working with our partners and government would be key to this so that we can get the funding to put it into place as well as the upkeep. So that's the tough part, is answering the question of how much is it going to cost us every year? And that's where I would love to work with Portland to see what that looks like in terms of pricing on a monthly and yearly basis.
Great.
I also just want to add that, we in this community right now, we're having the conversation around, are we going to implement a business improvement district? We have Andy Glean over here, who's the co-chair of the formation committee. Whether or not this could be something, the city of Portland outsourced to their bid, whether we would be able to do that as well.
Okay. All right. So a couple more questions. I think the city loses millions in tax revenue through economic development tax breaks for both builders and businesses. We also spend money to bring companies in. Could some of the money be used for building the bathrooms?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm
The
sure
most
there's,
easiest question.
I'm sure there are options in there that we could discuss when we're negotiating some of these tax breaks to make sure that they understand that we're not just giving out money or giving out the opportunity, but also we want investment into our communities.
Excellent.
Yeah, there's something called a community benefits agreement. We've talked about that for a while now. Whether basically it's when companies come in, if they're getting something, they have to give something as well.
Excellent. Okay. So I think the last question that we have from the audience, so we have this project for the skate park. We're putting lots of money in it. There is a proposed plan for a bathroom with that skate park, it sounds like. Can we get grant money or use city bonds for a 24-hour restroom similarly to this?
Yes.
Yes.
This is all, possible. It's whether we have the political will. The skate park project, they had a Friends of the Skate Park organization. They ended up raising, I think, over $1 million to start the project off. And then we had, city and also state funding to match that. We did just approve phase 2 and 3 of that project. So we will be getting public bathrooms at that site. They're not slated to be open 24/7, but there will be a public bathroom. So, like Mayor Domaratz said, there's different needs and different people. So, at the skate park site, it may only be that they need the bathrooms there when the skate park is open. But downtown, clearly we need different hours.
Yeah, where there's a will, there's a way, right? And when we have enough people come together to really focus on a need that's in the community, if we can pool the funds together as well as have the businesses on point with it, with different churches, even if they're not downtown, they could still come in on it and say, hey, look, this is for the greater good. Let's see what we can do about producing some funds towards it. That doesn't mean that you have to pay for the entire thing. What I'm saying is that the skate park had a lot of different funding sources, and they really came together to really make sure that the skate park came through, and the city was kind of like an added benefit with adding some additional funds to it. So I think if we continue with the fight and really pull together and come together, I think that there's a great opportunity here to be had.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if you came to the city and said, we'd like to do this, here's the money, of course, it'd be a much easier task. But I think it's a combination of all of the above.
Okay. I think that's all the questions. I think if some questions weren't specifically asked, they were indirectly asked throughout the panel discussion. Is there anything else we want to share before we end today from our panelists or I brought you up, I kind of bullied you up here. Sorry about that. Our city council members. Well, with that said, I appreciate Bryan and Evan waking up very early to come on our Zoom call from Portland, and all of you at home. Thank you for having.
Thanks for having us. Good luck with the project.
Thank you, Bryan. Thank you, Evan. Take care.